Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, May 28th, 2021. It's time to take a chance. What have we got to lose? Supporters of the FAIRtax like it for many reasons, and here are some of them. It eliminates the IRS from our lives. It eliminates both individual and corporate income taxes. Many believe the income tax is unconstitutional. You get your entire paycheck. It eliminates tax returns. Individuals and most businesses no longer have to keep extensive tax records. You control how much tax you pay by how much you spend. Decisions are made on sound business considerations, not tax considerations. The FAIRtax is much more stable. Good investments won't be changed into bad ones by unexpected changes to the tax code. Wealthy taxpayers and special interests can no longer purchase favorable tax treatment. Everyone pays their fair share. The FAIRtax eliminates one of the main tools used by the smart people in D.C. to control us. It forces those smart people to show us the real amount of the taxes we pay. Eliminating the income tax will reduce the cost of doing business and should reduce consumer prices by 10 to 15%. Used goods are not taxed under the FAIRtax. It brings jobs back to the U.S. from abroad. It puts American businesses on a level playing field in the world market. American goods will no longer have the cost of the income tax system embedded in their prices, so foreign-made goods will no longer enjoy a price advantage. The FAIRtax would dramatically reduce tax evasion, which the IRS commissioner now admits stands at around $1 trillion a year. Economic growth would be much higher with a FAIRtax over the income tax, and that will be good for all Americans. The FAIRtax would ensure the future solvency of Social Security and Medicare by expanding the tax base for those programs from just those people working for a paycheck to everyone whose spending exceeds the poverty level. The prebate will ensure that lower income groups are actually better off under the FAIRtax than they are under the present income payroll tax system. Now that's a pretty long list of reasons why all of our friends and neighbors should enthusiastically support replacing the income tax with the FAIRtax. Now almost everyone we explain the FAIRtax to immediately sees that it's a much better system than the income payroll tax, but many worry that it just makes too much sense for D.C. to ever implement it. Still, most agree that we should demand it anyway, regardless of what D.C. may think about it. Now, some people promise to go to our website, fairtax.org, to learn more about it. Others even promise to provide financial support for the effort. However, when we check back with them, many haven't followed through on their promises, claiming they're just too busy. Now, before we become too critical of these people, we need to keep in mind that all of us have many things competing for our time and our limited financial resources. The need to see things through other people's eyes was brought home to me when I accompanied my dad, who was a county sheriff, to see a family about some complaints from their neighbors. Now, this family lived in an unpainted house at the end of an unpaved road. There was no electricity, and we could see an outhouse out back. Now, my dad asked me to stay in the car while he went to talk to the parents. 3 children came out on the porch and stood there while my dad talked. And when Dad returned, I remarked that the whole family was wearing dirty clothes and looked like they hadn't bathed in quite a while. Now, my dad was a child of the Depression, and he grew up in circumstances even more primitive than this family. He said to me, "Steve, before you criticize, think of how many baths you would take if you didn't have any hot water and had to bathe in a large bucket, or if you had clean clothes only after your mother had washed them in a bucket." Now, the great majority of people in America live paycheck to paycheck, or close to it, and there's a good chance that many of your friends and neighbors are daily having to confront that problem. Many don't trust the government. They intuitively know that Ronald Reagan was right when he reminded people to think of the fate of the American Indian when they hear someone say, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." Now, many of us wonder why more young people aren't active FAIRtax supporters. But of course, many of these young people have families to support and must spend a great deal of their time working. They know that the ruling class and their DC minions are constantly changing the tax laws to reward those who can purchase favors while they get stuck with most of the bill. They may love the fair tax, but they fear that D.C. will add gotchas to it that will adversely affect them and their families. They know it may take some time for the many benefits of the fair tax to take full effect and begin to change their lives for the better. They fear that if there's even a temporary adjustment in the economy that adversely affects their ability to make money, or if prices don't adjust as quickly as planned, they might not be able to support their family during the transition period. In conclusion, one thing is all too clear. The current policies being pursued by the ruling class and their D.C. minions will inevitably push the U.S. economy right over a cliff. Now, something's got to be done before it's too late. President Trump asked a question when speaking to minority groups that applies to everyone who is concerned that the fair tax might create some temporary upsets in the economy. What have you got to lose? Now, almost all thinking people realize that the ruling class and their minions in D.C. are enacting policies that will be extremely detrimental to all of us. There's no doubt that current policies are reigniting inflation in the economy, and inflation will devastate lower-income earners and people on fixed incomes. It will cause interest rates on home and auto loans to rise rapidly, will increase the cost of all of our imports and exports, will push the price of gas back up to the $4 a gallon range or higher, and will do substantial harm to the economy that will be very hard to remedy. Now, there are many other problems that we all will experience as consequences of these policies. The ruling class and their D.C. minions are counting on us, not realizing that the higher prices we're paying for everything we buy are the result of their massive tax increases on higher income taxpayers and corporations. If we had the fair tax, the ruling class and their minions could no longer get away with hiding the impact of their tax increases that way. We would see the full amount of the taxes we're paying on every receipt for new goods and services. Now, Winston Churchill was very critical of people who bowed to Hitler's threats. He said, quoting, "An appeaser is one who feeds a crocodile, hoping it will eat him last," end of quote. When we refuse to stand up and demand the fair tax, aren't we really appeasing the powers that be in D.C.? Are we doing so hoping that they will harm us last? Appeasing people who are in the wrong has never worked in the past, and it won't work now. Now, while there may be some uncertainty regarding the transition from the income tax to the fair tax, one thing is rock solid certain. If we allow the ruling class and their minions to keep leading us down the path we're currently on, the result is going to be an unmitigated disaster for us, our children, and our grandchildren. What will we say to our children and grandchildren when the economy collapses and they ask us, "Why did you let this happen?" What have we got to lose by demanding the fair tax? It's time to take a chance and demand the fair tax. It's time that Americans take control of their country back by eliminating the income payroll tax system. No more games that profit only the ruling class and their D.C. minions. Enact the fair tax now. If you have friends who don't know about the fair tax, send them to FAIRtax.org. Have them watch the whiteboards under how it works, and if they agree, ask them to please join us. Then, contact your member of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the fair tax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.